I know. Get it out of your system. I know. I know. Look, I got my eyebrows done. It was a one-time thing. I promise that if I'm ever going to do something like that again, I'll tell you first. You know, it was very rude of me to not tell you and just jump in and do something like that. Incredibly rude of me. But somehow I manage. And somehow I managed to do that and keep it under wraps. And you guys didn't figure it out. I was wearing disguises, diving behind buildings. Nobody found me. And I got all the way there, got my eyebrows done. Oh, right. Also got my hair cut, of course. Thank you. I know. Turns out that you know, you can still get a haircut with this forehead. You probably didn't even notice I had hair. You got so distracted by this. But I saw an article. Focus. My eyes are down here. Focus. I saw an article, very interesting article, written by The Guardian. Okay, and they do fantastic work. It's written by Jonathan Wilson, who does a fantastic job with this piece, which is why I want to talk about it. Definitely, you can go read the entire thing if you want. This is the title and everything. But it is about, obviously, the U.S. men's national team aren't just underachievers. They're unlikable. And that's a very interesting thing to hear. Now, I'm somebody that loves talking about gray areas. I could talk myself in circles all day long. I also love getting other perspectives. That's very important when you grow up anywhere, I think, because no matter how put together you feel like wherever you grew up is, there is another place in the world that has a very different opinion about it. And that's obviously particularly true in the United States, but it's true everywhere, right? Because what you learn about this or that is different depending on where you are, and your perception of this or that is different depending on where you are. And all of that's cool. That's what makes, differences fun and everything. And it was bothering me. It was on my desk. Okay. And having a British newspaper news site write about the U.S. national team in this way was interesting because I really only have these conversations with other Americans. Right? You don't get an opinion, a look from England about what's going on with the U.S. national team. Right? There's a lot of reasons for this. One, not a lot of people take the U.S. national team seriously, even though they should, based off track record and level of talent. But when I say level of talent, I mean minutes in top leagues. All right? I'm talking about objective, factual references to the level of talent that is supposedly on this team. Right? And they are my national team, and I support them, and I hope they do well, and I hope they win things, even though we can never beat Panama, right? But this piece goes into detail about kind of the exact flaws in the huge shift, which I'd honestly never really thought about as intensely until I got to this piece. The shift in the way that the U.S. national team is viewed and the way that it is put together. And I think it is really well summed up in one sentence. I just needed to search it up. Underdog, they're trading in the underdog label for underachiever. Damn. And this piece is really scathing. Right? This piece is really, really scathing. I don't think unfairly so, but they highlight a few different reasons why the US national team isn't just bad right now. It's unlikable. Right. And obviously, I read the title. I didn't need to read it to you again. And one is that underdog status. This is the first national team the United States has had that's not an underdog. At the 1990-1994 World Cups, the United States was a massive underdog. It was a bunch of semi-professional guys that had played college soccer together, right? And they were thrown together at the United States FA to train for a year or two before they went to play against the world's best players. I mean, they were massive underdogs, raised in a country that couldn't give less of a shit about them until they got on the field in 1994. And they put together tough performances. And then you had teams like in 2002 making it to the quarterfinals with a team that it would be very gratuitous to say that it deserved to make it to that position, right? It was a team that was punching above its weight. It was a plucky group of hard-nosed, underskilled, and in all but a few cases, players that managed to battle and grit and surprise their way into getting more than what we thought they should. And in my opinion, this team existed through the 2014 World Cup. because of the 2014 World Cup, the U.S. was in the group of death. It was Germany, Portugal, Ghana, United States. This was unbelievable that the United States would get out of that group, finish above a Ghana team, which I remind you in 2010 was a handball away from a World Cup semifinal, would finish above a Portuguese team with Cristiano Ronaldo in his prime, right? A team that at a certain point, I think multiple points, had the lead against that Ronaldo team before a draw and scored a late winning goal. It's John Brooks for the USA against Ghana. It was unbelievable. That team had no business doing that. The wonder kid 18-year-old backup striker on that team was Julian Green, who ended up having a fine career, right, in the second division and at some points the Bundesliga in Germany. But he was not, the level of the types of wonder kids we have now, where it's like, I don't think Gio Reyna's playing enough at Dortmund. There's different gravy in that conversation. And Gio Reyna doesn't even get minutes for the U.S. national team anymore anyways. He's like a freaking enigma. Everybody knows he's great, but he doesn't get to play. Nobody ever puts him on the field because he gets injured or his parents are trying to blackmail the national team. Who the hell knows? There's just weird shit going on. But this team is not an underdog anymore. It's the most talented team in CONCACAF, just based off of top-level footballing experience. And I mean no disrespect to the Mexican League, where the majority of the Mexican national team plays and comes from, because that is the best league in CONCACAF. But the United States national team doesn't come from CONCACAF, which is another part of the problem that they kind of dig at here. Right? There's a provincial identity is something that's discussed, but it's also kind of discussed in this personalities section. Right? And it is definitely discussed down here in this paragraph. Alexi Lalas is not somebody with whom I agree on a very large number of things. But I think it's always important to distinguish difference between that and, I respect the hell out of what Alexi Lalas did to grow U.S. soccer and his career as a player and what he was able to do for the U.S. And I also believe every once in a while he can be right on something. And when he referred to the U.S. national team that failed to make the World Cup as a bunch of tattooed millionaires who didn't care as much, I didn't necessarily think he was wrong, because the team that missed the 2018 World Cup was objectively more talented than the team that got to the last 16 out of the group of death in 2014. It was just missing something. It was like the United States had finally arrived, but in arriving, it had lost the only thing that made the United States national team special. And that was that the U.S. national team, for whatever reason, was showing up to World Cups and getting fucking stuck in, making it hard, surprising teams, scoring last-minute winners, selling out, right? Having magic moments in the World Cup and just getting dominated the whole game and finding a way to do something. Now, you got a U.S. national team that can go toe-to-toe with England in terms of possessing the ball and creating chances, going 0-0 at the World Cup with England in a way that, it doesn't require the goalkeeper to just drop a shot from Clint Dempsey in order for the draw to happen. And yet that team, a little younger, couldn't get out of qualifying in the first place. Now, I know how devastating that was for guys like Christian Pulisic, how much they had to wear that. I think that was unfair. Football is a massive team game. If it wasn't, Argentina would have a lot more trophies because Lionel Messi's been the best player in every tournament he's played in for a really long time. Okay, so it's obviously unfair to zero in on one particular person. But this article hits on the fact that the United States seems to have lost what allowed it to be so competitive in the process of getting better, in the process of becoming a footballing nation. Alexi Lalas talked all the time, particularly around that World Cup qualifying cycle, and he was not alone amongst the other older American national team players, whether it be Clint Dempsey, whether it be Taylor Twellman, right? These guys that are the talking heads that we listen to in the United States, and sometimes even beyond, right? Talking about how hard they had to work just for recognition and all the things that they had to go through just to be able to play the game and develop, and how easy these guys have it in comparison. Then, of course, there's the provincial identity, right? The United States has long been a country that does very well. It does very well coming together for sports. Things like the Olympics, right, really get the United States going. They're really hammed up in the U.S., and there's a real kind of a leaning into the meme. And I feel like in a lot of ways, sometimes the rest of the world doesn't necessarily get that a lot of people in America are aware of the America meme. They just, you lean into it just kind of for fun in the same way that people from Scandinavia lean into the Viking meme. You know, like you just kind of, 1776 and George Washington sort of thing. But obviously, there are more, the United States has become more and more divided. It really has. And what this guy points out, right, in writing this piece for The Guardian is talking about the fact that the United States and its fracturing and the lack of anybody on the U.S. national team talking about it at all kind of creates a little distance as well. And basically what all of this boils down to is it doesn't feel as much like the American national team as it did before. And it's really interesting to have somebody say this. And I'm not saying the people that play on the national team don't care, and I'm not saying they're not good. They are. They're the best we have. But they're actual professional footballers now. From the time they're in their mid-teens, these guys are all moving to Europe and playing over there. They feel more culturally disconnected, even in a soccer sense, because the majority of the guys that play on the national team now, they didn't even play in MLS for a few years. You know, they're usually just gone. And that, I mean, that's great. We want them to develop and come up, but it's also a reckoning because we're used to, or should I say the United States is not used to having this national team of guys that, you know, the Olympians live in the U.S. typically, right? They feel more familiar. Then I go back to Alexi Lawless's Tattooed Millionaires rant, and I think really what he's trying to say with that is that there is not a lot of connection between the team and just the United States in general, whether it be the avid soccer fans in the U.S. or otherwise. And going into the World Cup, that's going to need to be there, right? And look, regardless of what happens, there will be a huge amount of support for the U.S. national team because there's just going to be a groundswell of rah-rah America sort of stuff, right? But if you really want to create a connection that actually drives the sport forward and helps recognize the potential of this team, it has to be more than just, oh, there's an American national team. I mean, they root for the U.S. cricket team too. Nobody has any idea what the hell's going on, and they're not connecting with any of the players, and it's gone. You need your Landon Donovans, your Clint Dempseys, your Alexi Lawlesses, your Tim Howards that connect with people so that they want to root for them. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the science of how that happens, but this article does and again, full credit to Jonathan Wilson. This article does a very good job of explaining the fact that this national team just isn't able to do that, right? It just feels like watching. In some ways, it feels like watching some foreign club team in the English Championship. Or like a Premier League team that's battling against relegation. Feels more like watching that than watching the teams that played in 2010 and 2014. And I look, the U.S., all this stuff always goes in waves. Eventually the U.S. will figure it out. And the fact that the United States is producing a lot more players and is way more focused on the sport is only in the long run going to lead to more and more quality in the team and the team being better. But in the short term, there's a lot of reckoning going on with the fact that the U.S. now has a capable team of international players and trying to really figure out what the U.S. national team is going to feel like going forward. Thank you. This article is great.